Hey, it's Xennial Gamer back with another Steel Fortress 10 video. The intro was just like an inside joke with my wife. Guys, today we've got another Steel Fortress B10 video. We're bringing back an old team with a new concept. And this new concept is actually bringing me down to about a 40-second average, and so far, no lie, 100% success rate, 0 fails in 1,500 runs. And the kicker is, on my account, I tried to use some of the worst runes that I could find. Now, the runes themselves, they are mostly gemmed and grinded, so I want to give that disclaimer. We're not talking about like you can build this team on day 3 of the game or something. But for most people who have been playing for a while, who have done any amount of raid and have really any kind of amount of violent runes and will runes on their account, you should be able to build this team. The overall average for me has been about 40 seconds. I'm just going to explain the concept of the team a little bit. I'm going to show you the runes, and then I'm going to show you an easy way to build this, which is, like I said, just sorting by default grade, right? So, to start off with, you have to understand how the boss works in this dungeon and what causes this dungeon to fail and what makes this dungeon difficult. Now, obviously RNG is what makes this dungeon difficult. If you use a buff block team, because there are a bunch of those, I've done videos on those, so have most other creators. If you use a buff block team, you have to have at least 2 buff blockers, and you're still going to have a certain percentage of the time where the boss resists. That's just Summoner's War, innate 15% resistance. If you do thousands and thousands of runs, that's going to happen, and those teams will either be incredibly slow because they involve like a Lauren or something, or they will get a certain fail rate, usually 1 to 3%. But there is no perfect AI, perfect success rate team that involves buff block. It's just not possible because of innate resistance. So the alternative is the dot team. Now you guys can see I'm running the dot team right now. This is the original GB12 dot team, and that is what most people use for Steel Fortress, but this team is slow. When you use the old school builds for GB12, the average run is somewhere around a minute. Like that last run that I just had, which is about the worst that these runs get, that would be a fast run, or at least an average run on the old school dot team. So the question we have to ask ourselves is why? Why does the dot team run so slow? Well, because the boss stuns. So then we ask ourselves, how do we get around that? Well, one option is to build with double will. One option is to go swift and just simply lap the boss. However, the boss gets a guaranteed turn after your team has acted 5 times. So even if you run swift and you generally lap the boss, you cannot lap the boss 100% of the time because the boss will get some turns. And then one of the side towers also does some attack bar boosting on the boss. And just in general, it's really hard to take enough turns that you can consistently reduce the speed, even if you invest your best swift. Even if it's like great endgame best swift, you're still not going to be able to cycle on the boss enough. The other thing that I mentioned, double will, has its own separate limitation, which comes back to accuracy resistance. For the same reason that buff block is not going to be consistent because the boss will resist sometimes, the boss will also resist some of your dots. Now with the dot team, generally speaking, the best way to deal with that is to go Vio. But you can't have both Vio and double will. So the solution, some of you guys may have already gotten it already, the solution is super simple. Max resistance builds. That's all it is. If you have a max resistance rune, the odds of getting stunned, they're not 0. You just saw 2 of my monsters get stunned. But they drop to 50-50. The boss only has 50% accuracy, so you drop from 15% chance to resist to 50% chance to resist, and when you multiply that over tons and tons of runs, and you multiply that over all the monsters on your team, it makes a pretty big difference. It allows you to get a few extra dots out. Those few extra dots that you get out, they slowly tick down the times, and just in general, it reduces the average speed of the dungeon significantly. So this one, 48 seconds, not gonna lie, that's probably the worst and slowest I've ever seen a set of 10. That's because I'm recording this video. Typically, this team averages, I've seen everywhere from 37 to like 44, 45, which is why I say 40-second average. The fastest sets of 10, usually around 37. Slowest sets of 10, usually around 45. That 48, definitely the slowest I remember seeing. Now, there are a couple of other things I want to note. So first of all, my Lucian right here, this was my old GB12 Lucian. This Lucian is way overkill. So specifically, what we actually need our Lucian to do is 21,645 total damage. If you divide that by 3 cards, it's about 7,215 per card. But we know that there is a slight bit of variance in this game on the actual damage you do. I don't know exactly what. Somebody once told me it's like a crit damage variance or something. Whatever it is, the cards, like from your peak to your floor, they vary by like 100, 150 damage. Not a lot. So if you get to 7,400 or 7,350 in that range, you're going to clear the waves by a mile. I think the Lucian that I just showed you guys is probably 10k cards. So way overkill. But all you have to do is get to about 7,400 damage. Now you can try to incorporate fight sets, but the builds I'm going to show you actually, they're pretty specific. There's really not a lot of room for fight sets, but 7,400 damage on a Lucian for most mid-game players should be very, very, very achievable. If you can't get there, it just means the runs are going to be a little bit slower, because think about it, Lucian derps half the time anyway, so it's not like he truly needs to clear the waves. Now, before I jump off this page, I just want to show you guys a couple more things. The boss right here has 39 resistance. That's really the only one we care about. We could look at the mid boss. He's also 39 resistance, right? So that means all of our builds have to have 24 accuracy, because obviously the boss has a guaranteed 15% resistance. So, and the Lucian doesn't need accuracy. Everybody else needs at least 24% accuracy. And then I mentioned earlier the boss has 50 accuracy. That's not the boss. There we go. The boss has 50% accuracy, which means we get a 50-50 chance by taking those max res builds. That's pretty much everything we need to see on here, with one final exception, the boss's speed of 150. This dungeon has the slowest boss in the game. So if you have a max speed tower, your monsters only need to be like 136 or 137 speed, something like that, because Sath has the really low base, so I think he might need to be like 137, 138, but I mean practically zero, right guys? If you don't have a max speed tower, you still only need to be faster than the boss. So if your speed tower is level 0, your Sath still only needs 150 combat speed. All of your monsters need 150 combat speed, but Sath is the only one with the really low base. Now, obviously, when you're building this team, if you plan to use this team for Giants B12, you do have to be faster. That boss has a 169 combat speed. However, Giants B12, there are so many better teams now. The Triple Crow team is way, way better and faster than the Dot team. It's relatively easy to build for a mid-game player. Obviously, for an early game player, the Dots team is the easiest team to build. But for most people who are able to build, like, let's say this one-shot Lucian that's doing 7,200 damage cards, if you can build this Lucian, you can probably build the Triple Crow team, which is going to be about 20-25 seconds faster per run in Giants B12. So once you've moved to that team, you still have all your Dots units, but you don't need to have them tuned for Giants anymore, which means you can slow them down and put them on these crappy runes I'm about to show you. So with that said, let's start off by looking at the Sath. Now, the Sath, I mentioned earlier Vio, right? The Sath does not really need Vio. Why not? Because he doesn't have 100% activation rate on his dots. So if you look at his passive, it's only a 50% activation rate on the dot. Now the skill 2 does have 100% activation rate, but he can't do that every time because of cooldown, and the skill 1 has no dot, so he's only really getting dots off the passive. You could put the Sath on Vio, but remember I mentioned earlier, the boss takes a turn after 5 of your monsters have gone. So if we think about in terms of turn sequence, our Lucian, not on Vio, so he's always going to take just 1 turn. Our Sath, not on Vio, he's always going to take 1 turn. The first violent unit we'll have is actually this Melia. And now, in theory, the Melia could proc twice, which brings you to a total of 5 turns, which means that the boss could take a turn before the second Melia and before the Tattoo Act. Now, one last thing I want to point out with the Sath is you'll notice mine is skilled up. And this is the one unfortunate part about this, guys, because I know it's tough to either spend devils or spend weeks skilling up a 2A monster. But when I tested this team, I noticed a significant improvement in this team by skilling up the Sath. And here's why. It's literally just about the passive. So in my case, I got unlucky. All the devils went skill 1, then skill 2. But it's just the skill 3 that actually needs to be deviled. So what's going to happen is you get 25% higher harmful effect rate, which is not only 25% more frequently Sath will put up an extra dot or a dot if he skill 1s on the boss, but it's 25% more frequently that your Melias then get to multiply their own dots, or at least the first Melia gets to multiply her own dots when there is a dot left by Sath. That makes a big difference. The skill 2, it's damage. It means nothing because we're not using Sath for damage. Skill 1 is damage. It means nothing. So if you get lucky, you just need the 2 devils in the skill 3, or you could get kind of unlucky like me and wind up having to full devil him. But that 25% harmful effect rate, when you multiply it over hundreds and thousands of runs, it does make a big difference. Now, as far as the stats go, this Sath, what do you see? He's got more than 24 accuracy, he's max resistance, and he's super tanky. This may look like it's got a lot of stats until you realize there's no crit rate, there's no crit damage, there's actually not a ton of speed, because he has a 91 base plus 64, and this is way more speed. Keep in mind, this is way more speed than I need. I don't need any of that extra crit rate that I have. Can use a little bit less accuracy. And I probably don't need to be quite this tanky, honestly. What I did was just look for some of the lowest tanky or lowest quality runes I could find. One more thing you'll find interesting, guys, I use mostly defense runes. There are a couple of HP runes in here. So the Sath does have an HP rune on the slot too. The Nemesis here is not important. It was just like, these were just kind of like really tanky runes that I could never use anywhere else. I mean, this rune is super, super thick, but other than a trap siege defense, it like literally has no use anywhere. This rune, great, 21 speed, HP flat, it's got no efficiency. I mean, it's well grinded. I mentioned at the start, all of my runes are grinded because, you know, I'm a late game player. But in terms of usability, this rune is not anything crazy, right? It's a nice rune. It really is. It's a nice rune, but it's Nemesis, so it doesn't have a lot of value. And then if you look at the Will Slot 6, this 32% attack, it's literally nothing on Sath. So if I was using this exact same rune, and instead of 32% attack, it had 1% resistance, all right, well, it can't be, you know, if it had nothing, like this could be a freaking blue rune, basically. You have 1 roll of defense, 1 roll of speed, and then a gemmed in HP, because the attack literally means nothing here. So this could actually be a white rune. Like, I could have made this work with a white rune because that attack means nothing. Now, my slot 5 is not even grinded. It's got flat defense on it, and the 15 crit rate is dead. So again, this is effectively, the stats that I'm using from this rune are effectively a white rune. Well, a green rune in this case. I have 1 extra roll into accuracy, because you could have like a single roll of HP and then grind it and get 14%, right? So I have 1 extra roll into accuracy, and on top of that,
1 eternity later.
As long as we reach max resistance, and then we make the monster reasonably tanky with 24 accuracy. Now, with the Melias, you're going to want to put both of them on Vio. I will say the will runes on this first Melia, they're completely wasted. It just so happens that I think that's like these runes landed on her while I was testing, and I just didn't take them off. But you could put a fight set. I said there's not a lot of room for fight sets. This is the one spot where you could put a fight set. So if your Lucian needed 1 fight set, you could put it on the Melia that acts first, not on the Melia that acts second. I mentioned this earlier, but because this Melia can theoretically proc, you need the monsters acting 4th and 5th on your team to have will runes so that they can't get stunned by the boss before they take their first turn. This monster will always go before the boss, and because of that, whatever her offset is, it doesn't matter. Now I'm going to point out here again, what are my runes? Defense, defense, resistance. Why defense? Because all I need is a high effective HP. This boss wins because it stuns you and because it gets buffed, but it does not defense break you. Which means that HP and defense have about the same value, other than obviously because I'm working on monsters with a lower base defense and a higher base HP, the HP runes amplify the HP a little bit more, but I just need my monsters to be moderately tanky. And so since defense runes are the runes we use the least, most of us have a lot of those clogging up our inventory. So my concept here was just use defense, defense, resistance. Now second Melia, next monster, gonna look more or less exactly the same. You notice the HP is nothing crazy high. I'm using the defense, defense, resistance. I'm getting some extra HP through my grinds basically and through the HP artifacts. 100 resistance, 24 accuracy. Then we get to the tattoo. Tattoo, Vio Will. I think I did have 1 HP rune on the tattoo because I just ran out of usable defense slot 2 runes. But it's defense, it's HP, defense, resistance. And again, we're just looking to make the build tanky. My tattoo is actually missing 5 resistance. I forgot about that. Now, as far as building this team goes, we're not going to optimize these. If you guys don't know how to use the optimizer, but you have access to it, I have done a video on how to optimize, specifically how to find the highest damage possible on your Lucian. I'm going to put a link. If you want to check out that video, you can see how to optimize the Lucian. So we're not going to look too much at his runes right now. Just remember, you need 7,350 per card, and you'll consistently clear these waves. But what you do need to make sure is that your Lucian is acting first. So the only thing that I think the only thing you might want to do in the optimizer while building this team is actually speed tuning your monsters. And you can do that on this speed tune tab over here. Just make sure at the top that your speed tower is correct. So if your speed tower is 10%, you put in 10, you can see all the numbers update, right? If your speed tower is 15, you put in the 15, whatever it is. As you build each monster, put their speeds in the optimizer. So along those lines, I recommend you build your Lucian first. Try and get your Lucian comfortably above 150 combat speed. Remember, 150 is the combat speed, which is your speed after tower that the boss has. So we just need to be 150 or higher on the tattoo. It does help to have a little bit of breathing room. So if you build your Lucian at like 160 combat speed, then you've got some breathing room for all the builds behind. Now from there, what I recommend doing, we're gonna come here, we're gonna go to Will Runes, we're gonna sort by default grade. Not even kidding. Not even kidding. We're just gonna take off equipped runes. We're going to come down here to the very bottom, and we're just going to find the first rune that happens to have either HP or resistance. I don't care which one it is. This has 25 speed. This is, it's a hero rune with 25 speed. I'm not wasting this rune. I don't need to waste this rune. Let's find a rune that has like very little speed and just like high HP with no speed, because we want to be slow anyway, right? 24 crit rate, I'm not wasting this. I know I've got good runes. This is a very efficient rune, but the attack percent and the crit rate mean nothing. So if you have just like a blue rune that just happens to have like 10 speed, just a little bit of speed, and then a couple of rolls into HP and you grind the HP, and the other two things can be like accuracy and who cares what, flat HP or something. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Just get a little bit of HP, a little bit of resistance, and apply that rune. And then we're just going to go in a circle, and we're just going to keep doing that, finding the lowest quality rune that just has a little bit of HP, a little bit of defense when it's available, a little bit of resistance or accuracy. And then also remember that for your slots 2, 4, and 6, for your slots 2 and 4, your first choice is defense runes, because those runes don't tend to have a ton of value for most of us, especially if they're not OP. Like an OP defense rune is awesome for Fang or Manon, but you're not going to use that many of them. And so if you have 10 defense runes, then your 2 or 3 best you need, and the rest are all just kind of chilling in inventory, like just doing nothing. So this rune right here, sure, it's got 20 speed, has nothing else that most of the time would ever cause me to use it. So we can go ahead and just apply it. Now, once I've applied all of these runes, notice I didn't apply, I should say once I've temporarily engraved all of these runes, I want to figure out where I stand with stats. So in this case, if I max this rune out, my resistance is fine. It's actually a little bit over, but I can see my accuracy is a little too low and my speed is a little bit too high, and then I can kind of circle back and just adjust those runes a little bit. Again, just looking towards the bottom of the list on default grade, excuse me. I'm not even really looking for a target effective HP or anything like that. I know as long as I have like a couple of defense runes, and as long as I have some HP through subs and HP artifacts, I'm gonna be tanky enough. There's no defense break on this boss, so all I really have to do is just survive like a couple of hits from the boss. The defense runes will be enough for that. So I'm just gonna keep tweaking this, and then once I have that build, so in this case for me it was 155 speed, I'm gonna come back over here into the optimizer, and I'm gonna type in the 155 on my south. Then I'm going to take a look at my Melia, and I'm just going to actually type in numbers until I figure out what's possible, right? So she has to be over 150 combat speed for the boss, so that's going to be somewhere around 134. So I know the slowest I can build the Melia is 134, and she can't act in front of the Sath. So the highest that I can build the Melia is, oh, that's way too fast. The highest I can build the Melia is going to be 153. And so that's my range. And that's the only thing I need to use the optimizer for, because actually if you optimize these builds, it will give you a bunch of higher quality runes. And the goal here is really to use the lowest quality runes you can that you would never be able to use anywhere else, and then just build these tanky monsters with max resistance and let them do their thing. As far as artifacts go, I mean, you can pretty much guess exactly what it is. You can use some accuracy if you need it. My Sath has it, he doesn't need it. And then just damage down from wind. That's it. Like, all we care about, damage down from wind. Right here, defense plus the lost HP is a really useful thing. Crit damage reduction is a useful thing, but I'm not going to lie, like, it doesn't matter. If you hit the builds correctly, just find a freaking white rune with HP and 15 it, and whatever it lands, it lands. It doesn't matter. This side, it does help to have some damage down from wind if your runes are not fully grinded, but it probably doesn't make a huge difference either. And that's it, guys. So that's how you build this team. You can see this one, 41 seconds. Again, this team goes mostly 37 to 44, so right around a 40-second average. Still have yet to have a fail. So this should be maybe not the fastest team out there, but I think it's probably the fastest team out there that does not involve an LD5, and I think it is definitely the most consistent team, even among those that involve LD5s, because if it doesn't fail, you can't get more consistent than that. Alright, so on that note, guys, as always, I appreciate you watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Please remember to smash that like button if you enjoyed the video, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.